Hey, what's up YouTubers, it's Dansky, and in this tutorial we're going to be learning how to design a web banner in Adobe Photoshop. So as you can see here, I've got my photo open in Photoshop already. I'm now going to go up to File, down to New, and create a new document. Now I've got the sizes for mine set at the width of 970 pixels wide and a height of 400. The resolution is 72 dpi and the background contents is white. Click OK, and you should get something that looks like this. Now we can then go back over to our photo and press Command A on the Mac or Control A on the PC. That will make a selection of the entire canvas. You can see the marching ants around the edge here, indicating that this is the selected area. And with this area selected, you can go up to Edit to Copy, switch over to our new document and click Edit, Paste. Now, this is a very high resolution image. It's considerably larger than the web banner that we've created. So when we paste it in, as you can see here, it's rather large. If we go up to Edit and down to Free Transform, you'll be able to see the bounding box of that image. And as you can see, it's absolutely massive. So to scale that down, we're just going to hold Shift to keep it proportional and drag from the bottom right corner. So something like that. And then to confirm this, this move, you've got the tick up here just to accept those changes, or you can just simply double click. And there we go. So now we can move this around a little bit, adjust the crop. So I'm going to go for something like this. Now for your web banner, you may have particular text, content, you may have a logo, some branding, all sorts of different things that you may need to include. But for this example, I'm just going to add some text and a button or call to action. So we've got the image and the crop. I'm happy with that. It looks lovely. I'm just going to call that mountain. And then I'm going to click this button here just to lock that layer. So you can lock the layer here with the padlock icon. You can also click this one here that I quite like that locks the position. So I can still right click and go to blending options and adjust these if I need to. Whereas if you click the lock button, you can't do any of that. It is totally locked and cannot be edited or moved in any way. So they're very similar, but one is just totally locked down. And this one that I've selected allows me a few other options, even though it's still locked to the position of this layer. So I'm now going to create a new layer. And then with the type tool, I'm just going to left click anywhere on the canvas. I'm going to go up to here and just click on this and change my text color. I'm going to go for something like this, just slightly off black. And I'm going to type the text. What will you discover? Question mark. And that's absolutely massive. So I can press Command A on the Mac or Control A on the PC to select all of the text. And then I can adjust the size here. I can also select the selection tool and then go up to Edit, Free Transform, and then adjust this text as I like. So I can drag it and it will skew the text, or I can hold Shift to keep the text proportional. So this is my text here. I'm now going to go over to my layers palette and create another layer. And I'm going to select the rectangle tool. And I'm just going to left click and drag. And there we go, we've created the shape for our button or call to action. A call to action is what you want the user to click. So once they've read your message and you've engaged them, what do you want them to do? It could be as obvious as something like click here, or it could be shop now, some engaging text that tells your user what to do next. So we could have this square. You could go over to the properties palette in the CC version of Photoshop, and we can adjust the radius of the corners here, so we could round those off like so. I think I'm going to go for that one, to be honest. And if we select the type tool again, left click anywhere on the artboard, it will automatically create a new layer. So you can create the layer first, or you can just click with the type tool and it will create that new text layer for you. And we're going to type our call to action. Let's go with click here. No, that's very unoriginal. Shop now. So pretending that this is a fictional product that you want someone to buy into. Let's go book now. It makes a bit more sense given the context of discovering something. So So we can select that again with the type tool. You can make a selection of individual characters, or you can press Command A on the Mac or Control A on the PC to select all of the text. And we can adjust the size and bring that down a little bit, just so it sits in that call to action box nicely. And we could make that a little bit bolder. After all, we do want this to be visible. So the text needs to be clear. The color needs to have a good amount of contrast with the background ideally, because this needs to be something that is very visible to your visitor, your user. So let's go with a nice bold kind of reddish pink color, something like that. And then we can select the text again with our type tool and click up here in this space, and we can change the color of the text there. And I'm going to make this a bit bolder still. Let's go with bold. Now we've got our message up here. So let's select the U text. We're going to bold this in particular. We want this to stand out because this message, this banner is talking to the visitor, the user. So what will you discover? We want to place some emphasis on this word. So really kind of asking the user that question. So this is what helps create an engaging graphic. Now what can we do with the text? Well, we can do a few things. We could try and nest this up here. And that would sit quite nicely. This text would sit within this space. It's not over the mountain down here where you can see that it can get quite obscured. There's a lot of background detail that just makes the text a lot harder to read. And up in this space, it actually stands out quite well. Something else we could do is create a new layer, select black as our foreground color, select our fill tool and fill that layer with solid black. Now we can then drop the opacity on this using the slider here. So our background is still visible, but what this allows us to do is we can turn our text here white, and we could make it bigger using the free transform tool. Remember, that's up here, edit, free transform. And we could hold shift and left click on all these individual layers. You'll see over here that they all become selected. And we could drag this into the center. So now, rather than having our message and our call to action smaller and nestled in the top left corner, we've now pulled it right into the center. So it literally is front and center of this image. And this, I'm going to call this layer darken. So this layer that we're using to darken that background, although it is darkening the background and making that harder to see, the background image is still clearly visible. You can clearly identify what it is and that it is a mountain. But in doing that, in making it darker, you actually help bring out the text, the main message, and that call to action, and make that more prominent. So it's finding a balance between your image, how dark you want to make it, how and where you position your text. So it really is a bit of a balancing act to try and find the ideal balance between design and aesthetics and actual legibility. How much does the call to action stand out? A whole bunch of things. So it's taking everything into consideration. So then, for example, you could select the U text again. You could italicize this. So make that italic. And you could give it another color. So adding that color there makes it a little bit harder to read, ever so slightly, and it almost clashes a little bit with the book now because we want this book now to really stand out. So I'm going to leave that in white, but in bold. What we could do, however, is this is all just written in one line. Now we could do something a bit more interesting than that. So I'm going to go over to the layers palette, and with this main message layer selected, I'm going to press Command J on the Mac or Control J on the PC to duplicate that layer. And then holding shift and left clicking, I'm just going to drag this down. So now I'm going to delete the you discover bit at the end. And I'm going to duplicate this layer again and move that down. And I'm going to type U. And then I'm going to go down and type discover. So rather than having it written all on one line, we're going to spread this out over 3 lines and keep it all very central. So I can select this original layer and I can just tick the eye icon here and it will hide that. And to show it again, you just click. So now I'm going to select all of the U text, make that bold. Now I can capitalize this in one click by going up to here. You see this little symbol, you click that and you'll get a load of text options. They can also be displayed in the palette on the right. And there's one here with the 2 T's, and that is all caps. And if I click that, any letters that I type will automatically be capitalized. Now using the free transform tool and holding shift, we can scale this up. And I'm going to scale down what will and discover a little bit. So I'm going to hold shift to select those 2 layers. You can see them selected here, just those 2. And then we're going to go to edit and free transform and bring those down. Now I want to centralize all this. It's all gone a bit winky wonky. I don't know what winky wonky is, technical term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on the darken layer and holding down the command key on the Mac or control key on the PC, I'm going to select the different layers that I want to select. Notice that I'm doing this in the layers palette this time, so you can select objects on the canvas or you can select them in the layers palette. With those layers selected, I'm going to go up here to the top where I've got my alignment options and I'm going to go horizontal, align, center. And there we go, it snaps everything to that darken layer. And the darken layer does take up the entire canvas. So aligning all of these text layers, the buttons, the what will you discover to that darken layer will put it all in the middle. And now I can left click the book now at the top, hold shift and to select all of these layers and then using the arrow keys, just nudge that up. So it's roughly in the center. And I'm going to capitalize this book now text as well. So remember, we can go over to our character palette, select the 2 T's, that will make it uppercase. And then I'm just going to go free transform and bring that size down a little bit like that. Now this text isn't looking too bad. I think given the letters that I've got, there's a few strange characters here. So the Y kind of comes in from the edge a bit and there's this negative space here. For example, if I type the letter U, it fills out quite a lot of this space. So the word discover underneath looks a little bit more centralized. However, with a Y, this space underneath the left part of the Y doesn't help it look entirely centered. So what can we do about that? Well, one thing we can do, I mean, there's a million different things you could do, but one technique that I quite like to use often is if we select our rectangle tool and just drag a rectangle. So like this, fairly thin, we can adjust the height to maybe 2 pixels. And I typically would make this the width of some of the bolder text. So I've pulled out the word U, I really want to highlight this, so I'll make it the same width as that. And then I can left click down here on the path selection tool and select the direct selection tool. Just left click and drag over these 2 points on the left. And using the arrow keys, you can nudge those in. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a divider here. So this helps give the whole text composition a little bit of structure. So let's just duplicate this rectangle there and we'll do the same down here, move it down below. And then just space these words, what will, and discover, just equal distance apart. So now, rather than discover needing to line up a lot more with the word you, we've got these structural bars across the composition that help give the words above and below some structure. So now discover doesn't look a little bit out of place with the Y, it's actually trying to line up with this, this kind of horizontal line above it. So that's quite a handy technique if you need to give a certain element some structure. In fact, actually what I'm going to do is, these lines work structurally, but design-wise, I'm not totally happy. I think there is room to improve that. So what I'm going to do is select our rectangle tool, left click and hold, and I've just drawn a white four-sided shape. Go me. And then I'm going to right click on this new shape, go to blending options. Now I don't want this shape to have any fill, so on the first screen I come to, I'm going to select fill opacity and drag that all the way to 0. Then what I'm going to do is select stroke, so just click there to tick that box, set the position to inside, and we're going to make the width, let's say 6 I think, and we'll click OK. Now I'm going to replace these lines with this white box, and this is going to go around the word U. So I'm using the arrow keys here just to nudge that in place. You can also use the direct selection tool just to select these bottom 2 points, and again use the arrow keys to tap that down in place. I'm going to select again these right 2 anchor points with the direct selection tool, and then just using the arrow keys just nudge that over. Now I can switch off these 2 rectangle layers, or you can delete them if you don't need them anymore. And then using the direct selection tool again, I'm just going to nudge all the spacing here. Just make this box a bit bigger, so there's a bit of breathing space around the edge of the lettering. We don't want it feeling too squashed or too tight. So there we go, something like that I think. And then we'll just space out this lettering above and below as well. And then give the call to action a little bit of space from the main message, but so it's still close enough that it clearly relates to this. You don't want to space everything too far apart. In fact, I'm going to actually get rid of these 2 lines now. We've finished with those. We don't need them anymore. So I can select both of these layers, and then you've got the delete, a little trash bin icon in the bottom right here. So we can get rid of those. And the original what will you discover text, we don't need this anymore. So we can also delete that. Now I'm fairly happy with the darken layer. I'm going to lock this by clicking this layer here. The reason I click this layer instead of the padlock is if I click the padlock, I can't adjust the opacity. Whereas if I click the lock position icon, it won't move and I can't select it, but I can still quickly adjust the opacity if I need to. So that's a quite handy one there. Now let's just space this whole composition out from the top and bottom a bit more consistently. So just nudge it down a bit, just so the distance here at the top is equal to this at the bottom. So it's central both horizontally and vertically. Now one last thing we can do, and this is entirely optional, we've darkened the entire background. If we don't want to, but we want to just darken the area where the text is to help it stand out, there's something we can do. So we've got our darken layer selected. You can have the position locked or not, it doesn't matter for this bit. But if you click the mask icon down here, it will add a layer mask. And just make sure that you've got black selected as your foreground color. And select your brush tool. Go up to the top, select one of the feathered brushes with the hardness set to 0 and the size. I'm going to set my size to probably about 300 or 400. Let's go with, no, about 500. And what you can do now is just gently brush away. Remember, you've got the mask selected over here and black as your foreground color. Just brush away around the edges. Now we don't want to make this too obvious, like there's a big, dark, cloudy mess behind our text, because it will just look too obvious. If we do this, and both the left and the right is lovely and bright, and then the center is dark, it's just too obvious and it looks fake and photoshopped and a bit rubbish. So what we're going to do is just gently just brush away some of these areas really lightly. So we've got a feathered brush here, just so it's not too hard or anything. We want this to be nice and subtle. Just gently brush into it a bit. And to make it even less obvious that we've darkened the center, we can even bring the opacity down a bit more. So something like maybe 40%. Even that 10% makes a difference. Now you can, again, like I said before, it's very much a balancing act with trying to get this right. You yourself may notice the effect. Because you've applied the effect, it may be more noticeable to yourself. But ask someone else, show someone else when you've done it and say, like, does anything look wrong with this graphic? And if they can spot that you've kind of cheated it and you've added this weird darkened fade in, then that's fine. They've caught you out, go back, revise it, do what you need to do. But a lot of the time, if you can get the balance right here, then this technique works wonders in just creating a really great graphic that helps the messaging stand out, but it doesn't completely dull the image down. But there we go, we've created a web banner in Adobe Photoshop. As always guys, please feel free to leave any questions or comments below. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Take care and I'll see you next time.